Marla Dawson returned to her hometown on a quiet, windy afternoon, and even she did not know what she truly felt. 10 years was a long time to stay away from people, from streets filled with memories, from voices that once knew her name. The bus stopped in front of the old county road, and she stepped down slowly, carrying only one large bag that held everything she had left. She looked around with cautious eyes, unsure whether she was ready for this place or if this place was ready for her. She had once been known in town, mostly for her tall, strong figure and her gentle nature. People used to smile when she walked by, especially when she and her husband ran their small bakery together. But life changed suddenly when he died in an accident. The pain had pushed her into silence, and silence had pushed her away from everyone she knew. She left town hoping distance would heal her, but some wounds simply grow deeper when ignored. Now she was back because her parents' farmhouse, abandoned for years, had to be sold. She wanted the process to be quick, simple, and quiet. She expected no conversations, no familiar faces, no unnecessary emotions. She pulled her coat tightly around her tall shoulders as she walked toward the county office. The wooden building looked the same as she remembered, only older. She pushed the door gently, hoping no one would notice her. But the bell above the door rang loudly. People inside turned briefly, then went back to their work. Marla exhaled with relief. She approached the front desk but paused when someone stepped out from the side room, a tall man with sun-tanned skin, deep brown eyes, and a calm presence that filled the room effortlessly. He wore simple ranch clothes, a dusty jacket, worn boots, and a hat tucked under his arm. His steps were strong but unhurried, like someone who lived life without rushing to impress anyone. It was Clint Mercer. She recognized him instantly, though they had barely spoken years ago. Back then, he used to come to her bakery early in the mornings to buy fresh bread. She remembered how he always stood politely at the end of the line, even when he was in a rush to return to his ranch. He had a quiet way of observing people without staring, and he always nodded to her with respect. He never tried to flirt, never tried to charm her, only treated her with simple kindness. She remembered that because kindness was something that never leaves the heart. Clint noticed her too. His eyes softened with recognition, and he stepped forward. "Marla Dawson," he said in a low, steady voice that carried warmth. "It's been a long time." Marla tried to smile, but her lips barely moved. She had forgotten how to talk comfortably with people. "Hello, Clint," she whispered, her voice dry from nerves. I didn't expect anyone to remember me." Clint shook his head with a small, gentle smile. "You don't forget good people." Her heart tightened unexpectedly. She was not used to compliments anymore. She wasn't used to being seen at all. The lady at the front desk helped her with the paperwork for the farmhouse, but Marla's hands shook slightly as she signed the documents. She hoped no one noticed, but Clint did. He watched her with quiet concern, not staring too long, but long enough to understand that she was struggling more than she wanted to admit. When the paperwork was complete, Clint walked with her outside, as if it was the most natural thing to do. Marla felt nervous, not because she feared him, but because she feared how unfamiliar normal human interaction felt after so many years alone. "You're here to sell the farmhouse?" Clint asked gently. She nodded, hugging her bag closer. "Yes. I don't have any reason to keep it, and I don't think I can maintain it." Clint studied her expression carefully. He didn't see just a widow. He saw a woman carrying years of quiet pain that had pressed down on her shoulders until even her tall, strong frame looked tired. "I can take a look at the place," he offered kindly. "If you want. Make sure everything is safe and still standing right." Marla blinked in surprise. "You don't have to do that." "I can manage." "I know you can," he replied calmly. "But it doesn't mean you should do it alone." Those words touched her more deeply than she expected. For years, she had done everything alone. Every meal, every repair, every lonely decision. No one had offered help without expecting something in return. No one had stood beside her simply because they cared. She didn't answer right away. She stared at the distant hills, trying to steady her breathing. Clint waited patiently, not rushing her. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you. I would appreciate the help." They walked together toward his truck, and Marla moved carefully, almost shyly, as if she was afraid of taking up too much space. She sat silently while Clint drove, watching the familiar roads pass by like ghosts from her past. The farmhouse stood at the end of a long dirt road, surrounded by overgrown grass and old trees whose branches bent downward like tired arms. As they stepped out, Clint walked ahead to inspect the porch, the windows, and the fallen fence. Marla kept a few steps behind, unsure whether to help or simply observe. She felt helpless, like a visitor in her own history. Clint touched the damaged wood gently. "It's old, but still strong," he said. "Just needs a bit of care." He spent the next couple of hours fixing small things around the property, tightening bolts, clearing away branches, and checking the roof from the ground. Marla watched him from a distance. There was something comforting about the way he worked. His movements were steady and sure, as if he had spent his whole life repairing things quietly, without fuss. At one point, he asked her to hand him a tool. She did so with clumsy fingers, brushing his hand lightly by accident. She pulled back immediately embarrassed, but Clint pretended not to notice her fluster. He simply smiled and said, "Thank you." Those simple words made her heart beat faster. As the sun began to set, Clint wiped his hands on a cloth and looked at her with a gentle expression. "You shouldn't stay here alone tonight," he said softly. "The house is cold, and the electricity might be weak. Come to my ranch for dinner. I'll drive you back later if you prefer." Marla's breath caught, her eyes lowered. "I haven't shared a meal with anyone in 10 years, she admitted, her voice barely audible. The confession slipped out without planning, as if the truth had been waiting to escape. Clint's expression softened even more. There was no surprise or judgment in his eyes, only understanding. "That's all right," he said quietly. "Then let tonight be a simple one. No expectations. Just food and a warm place to sit." Marla hesitated. She felt shy, exposed, uncertain if she was ready for something so ordinary, and yet so new. But there was something calm in Clint's voice, something grounding. He didn't pressure her, he simply offered a moment of comfort. She finally nodded. "Okay. I'll come." The drive to his ranch felt different from the earlier one. She sat straighter, her hands still trembling slightly, but inside she felt a tiny spark she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't excitement or hope, just the simple feeling of being treated kindly. When they reached Clint's ranch, the warm lights from the porch glowed softly in the evening air. It wasn't grand or fancy, but it felt alive, lived in, and safe. Clint held the door open for her, and she stepped inside slowly, taking a cautious breath. This was her first night speaking to someone, sharing space with someone after a decade of silence. And though her heart trembled, she felt something she had forgotten long ago. The world had not forgotten her. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to live alone forever. The warm light inside Clint's ranch house wrapped around Marla like a gentle blanket. She stood near the entrance for a moment, unsure where to move or how to behave. It had been so long since she stepped inside another person's home. She feared touching anything, feared appearing awkward, feared making a mistake. But Clint noticed her hesitation and spoke softly, as if guiding a nervous traveler. "Make yourself comfortable," he said. "You're safe here." His voice was steady, the kind that reassured without trying too hard. Marla slowly stepped further inside, looking around the living room. It was clean but lived in, with wooden shelves holding old ranch books, framed pictures of cattle, and a few photographs of Clint's family. A large window let the evening light spill inside, painting gentle colors across the wooden floor. Clint walked toward the kitchen area, giving her space to settle. She placed her bag carefully beside a chair and sat down slowly, folding her hands in her lap. She felt extremely aware of every small movement she made, as if the silence around her was watching. Clint turned on the stove, the soft sound breaking the heavy quiet. "I hope you like simple food," he said lightly. "I'm not much of a fancy cook." Marla offered a small smile. "Simple is good." "I haven't had anything fancy in a long time." He glanced her way and saw the tired honesty in her eyes. It wasn't sadness exactly, more like someone who had carried loneliness so long she had gotten used to its weight. "I'll make something warm," he said, pulling out ingredients. "It's been cold lately." She nodded, feeling grateful though she didn't know how to express it. As he cooked, she observed him quietly. His hands moved with confidence, not rushed, not careless. Everything he did seemed calm. He chopped vegetables, stirred the pot gently, and checked the seasoning with small, thoughtful motions. He was a man who didn't speak unnecessarily, but every action he took felt full of intention. The air filled with the comforting smell of food. Marla felt hunger she hadn't acknowledged earlier. A reminder that she had only eaten a small snack on the bus. Her stomach tightened, embarrassed to be so noticeable, but Clint pretended not to hear, giving her dignity without calling attention to her need. He set the table with 2 plates and waved her over. "Come sit. Dinner's ready." Marla stood slowly and joined him. She took her seat quietly, smoothing her dress as if making sure she looked presentable. Clint placed a bowl of warm stew and some fresh bread before her. "I hope it tastes all right." She picked up her spoon, her hands still slightly shaky from nerves. When she took the first bite, warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just the heat of the food, but the feeling of eating something prepared by someone who actually cared she was being fed. She blinked, surprised by the sudden wave of emotion. She swallowed carefully and nodded. "It's really good," she murmured. Clint's smile was small but sincere. "I'm glad." They ate quietly for a while. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was simply new. Marla kept her eyes mostly on her bowl, only glancing up occasionally. He didn't rush her or demand conversation, which helped her breathe easier. She noticed how he ate in peaceful rhythm, as if he had learned long ago how to enjoy calm moments. After a few minutes, Clint spoke in a gentle tone. "If you don't mind me asking, how have you been living these past years?" Marla paused her spoon in midair. She took a breath, trying to choose her words carefully. "Quietly," she whispered. "Very quietly." Clint nodded, accepting the answer without pushing for more. "Must have been lonely." She looked down at her hands, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't know how to stay connected. After my husband passed, I felt like I couldn't talk to people anymore. Not properly. Every time I tried, I felt like I was falling apart." She didn't cry, but her words held 10 years of buried pain. Clint listened without interrupting, letting her speak at her own pace. "Sometimes," she continued softly, "I thought I would get better, but the days turned into years and I stayed in the same place, just living, not really living." Clint's expression turned thoughtful. "But you came back," he said. "That takes strength." She shook her head slightly. "I came back because I didn't have a choice. The farmhouse needed to be sold." "Maybe," Clint replied gently. "But sometimes life brings us back to places for reasons we don't see at first." His words rested in her heart like a seed, though she didn't fully understand them yet. After dinner, Clint made tea and suggested they sit on the porch. The night air was cool but pleasant. Marla followed him outside, moving slowly, her steps heavy from both tiredness and uncertainty. They sat on wooden chairs overlooking the quiet ranch fields. The moon hung low, spreading its soft silver light across the land. Marla pulled her coat tighter around herself. Clint noticed. "You can borrow a blanket if you'd like," he offered. She shook her head shyly. "No, thank you. This is fine." They sat quietly again, watching the night animals move in the distance. Marla felt calmer than she had in years. Maybe it was the warm meal, or maybe it was Clint's steady presence. For the first time in a long while, silence didn't feel frightening. It felt peaceful. After a few minutes, Marla spoke softly. "Clint, can I tell you something?" He turned his head slightly, giving her his full attention. "Of course." She took a long breath, gathering courage she rarely used. Her heart thumped nervously, but she knew she needed to say it. The words came out gently, almost trembling. "I'm shy," she whispered. "It's been my first night with someone in 10 years. She didn't mean it in any romantic or emotional way, just in the simple truth that she had not shared a meal, a conversation, or a moment this close with another person for so long. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and unsure how he would react. Clint didn't laugh or look surprised. He didn't make her feel strange or dramatic. Instead, he leaned back slightly, letting his voice soften even more. "Then let tonight be easy for you," he said. "No pressure, no expectations, just two people sharing a quiet evening." His calm acceptance made her feel a warmth she hadn't felt in forever. She lowered her gaze, her eyes softening. "Thank you," she said, her voice almost disappearing into the night air. Clint nodded. "You've carried a lot alone. You don't have to rush anything. Just take your time." Marla felt her chest lighten a little. She stared at the dark field, feeling the cool breeze touch her cheeks. She wasn't sure if she was ready for anything more than this, but she knew she didn't want to return to silence completely. For the rest of the evening, they talked in small, simple sentences. Clint told her about the ranch, about how he worked with a few helpers during busy months, and about the calm nights he enjoyed when the cattle were settled. Marla listened, feeling comfort in the steady tone of his voice. She shared a few small memories from her bakery days, nothing deep, but enough to show she was slowly opening up. When the night grew colder, Clint stood and said he would drive her back to the farmhouse. Marla hesitated. The thought of returning to that cold, dark place made her uneasy, but she was too shy to ask for anything else. Clint noticed the hesitation in her eyes. "If you prefer," he said gently. "I can set up a guest room for you here, only if you're comfortable." Marla blinked, startled by the offer. She didn't answer right away. She felt torn between fear and relief. The farmhouse was empty and unfamiliar, while the ranch felt warm and safe, but she didn't want to be a burden. Clint spoke again, reading her worry. "You won't trouble me, I promise." She finally nodded. If it's not too much." "It's not," he said softly. He prepared the guest room with fresh sheets and a warm blanket. Marla stood at the doorway, unsure how to thank him. She simply whispered, "Good night." Clint nodded. "Good night, Marla. Rest well." She lay down on the soft bed, staring at the ceiling. She felt nervous, grateful, and strangely peaceful. Outside, she heard the distant sound of the wind brushing against the ranch walls. She closed her eyes, letting the comfort of the room surround her. For the first time in 10 years, she wasn't alone. And she drifted to sleep, not with fear or sorrow, but with a quiet sense of beginning. Morning sunlight entered the small guest room slowly, painting soft lines across the blanket where Marla lay. She woke up gently, almost unsure of where she was. For a moment, she panicked, thinking she had overslept in some strange place. But then she remembered Clint's quiet voice, the warm dinner, and the calm porch where they had talked under the moon. Her breathing steadied. She sat up slowly, brushing her hair behind her shoulder, realizing how rested she felt. It had been years since she slept without waking from loneliness or cold. She stood up carefully, smoothing the bed as a habit. When she stepped out into the hallway, she heard faint sounds from the kitchen, light clattering, the sound of a kettle heating, quiet movements like someone being thoughtful not to wake others. She took slow steps toward the kitchen, unsure if she was intruding. Clint turned when he heard her footsteps. He gave a small smile, warm and natural. "Morning, Marla. Hope you slept well." She nodded softly. "I slept better than I expected." "That's good," he replied, pouring tea into a cup for her. "Tea? I kept it light. Wasn't sure what you prefer." She accepted the cup with both hands, feeling the warmth spread through her palms. "Thank you. This is perfect." The kitchen smelled of something simple but comforting: fried eggs, warm bread, and a bit of butter melting on a pan. She noticed Clint had already set 2 plates on the table. He didn't make a big deal out of it. He just quietly prepared breakfast as if this morning was normal, as if having her here wasn't unusual. Marla sat down slowly, her fingers curling around the warm cup. She watched Clint work with calm, steady movements. He didn't rush anything. He didn't talk unnecessarily. He seemed to understand she was still adjusting. When he finally joined her at the table, he spoke in a gentle tone. "You don't have to hurry with anything today. I'm going to check some things on the ranch, and later we can drive back to the farmhouse if you want to look inside again." Marla looked down. The farmhouse felt heavy to her heart. She wasn't ready to step into those rooms alone, but Clint's presence made things feel less frightening. "That would be helpful," she whispered. "I'm just still gathering courage." "You don't have to have all of it at once," Clint replied. "Courage can come in small pieces." His words settled in her chest like a soft truth she had forgotten. After breakfast, Clint went outside to check on his horses and cattle. Marla followed him at a distance, curious but shy. The ranch was peaceful. The fields stretched far, golden in the morning light. The air held the smell of hay and earth. She felt something inside her loosen, as if a tight knot had finally started to relax. Clint noticed her watching and walked over. "Want to see the horses up close?" She hesitated. "I haven't been around animals in a long time." "They're gentle," he said kindly. "I'll stay right beside you." She nodded. Clint guided her toward a brown mare that seemed to sense Marla's nervousness. The mare stepped slowly, lowered her head, and waited. Marla reached out her hand, trembling a little, and touched the mare's warm forehead. She felt a strange wave of relief, as if even animals understood she had been alone too long. "She likes you," Clint said. Marla smiled faintly. "I didn't think anyone or anything would remember me." "Some things don't need remembering," Clint said softly. "They just feel." Her eyes softened at his words. Later, Clint prepared the truck, and they drove back toward the old farmhouse. Marla's hands tightened around her bag as they approached the long dirt road. The closer they came, the more memories pulled at her. Memories of her parents, memories of quiet holidays, and memories that reminded her how empty the place had become after they were gone. Clint parked the truck and turned to her. "We'll go in together," he said. She nodded, grateful for the reassurance. They stepped onto the old porch. The wood creaked under their shoes, but not threateningly, just like a house that had been waiting too long. When Marla opened the door, a dusty scent drifted out. She took a slow breath and stepped inside. The rooms were filled with old furniture covered with cloth sheets. Sunlight entered through cracked blinds, casting lines across the floor. It felt abandoned, but not unfriendly, like a faded memory that needed attention. Clint walked beside her quietly, giving her space to absorb the emotions. She touched the old table with trembling fingers. "My mother loves sitting here," she whispered. "She used to sew every afternoon." Clint listened carefully, letting her speak. "My father kept his tools in that corner," she said, pointing softly. "He fixed everything himself. He never liked throwing things away." "Sounds like he cared about what he had," Clint said. "Yes," she murmured. "He did." They walked through the rooms slowly. Every step brought back something long buried. Small moments she had forgotten. She paused in the doorway of her childhood bedroom. Dust covered the old dresser, and the bed looked smaller than she remembered. She walked inside with hesitant steps. "I used to stand here and watch the stars," she said softly. "Back when life felt simpler." Clint stood at the doorway, not intruding. "You've gone through a lot," he said quietly. "It's all right to feel overwhelmed." Marla turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and sudden guilt. "I feel like I let this house die," she whispered. "I should have come back earlier." Clint shook his head gently. "You were surviving. There's no shame in that." She lowered her gaze. "But I left everything behind." "Sometimes," he said in a calm voice. "People leave because staying would break them even more." Her eyes lifted slowly. His words felt like a deep understanding she had never been given before. She swallowed hard and nodded. They spent a few hours walking through the house, checking which parts needed repairs. Clint explained what could be fixed quickly and what might take time. Marla appreciated the way he spoke, never making her feel incapable, never judging the state of the place. As the afternoon sun began to lower, they stepped outside to the yard. The wind brushed lightly through the dry grass. Marla stood there for a moment, closing her eyes, feeling memories move around her like quiet ghosts. Clint stood beside her, not touching her, not speaking, just present. After a while, she whispered, "Thank you for being here." Clint looked at her, his eyes steady. "You don't have to thank me. I want to help." Marla felt her throat tighten. She wasn't used to someone wanting to help her simply because they cared, not out of pity, not for any reason other than kindness. She wasn't used to standing beside someone who made the world feel less heavy. When they drove back to the ranch, the sky had turned a warm orange. The light filled the truck in soft colors. Marla looked out the window, feeling something shift inside her, something small yet important. For the first time in many years, she didn't feel like a shadow. She felt like a person again. When they reached the ranch, Clint asked gently, "Would you like to stay for dinner again?" Marla hesitated, but her heart knew the answer. Being here made her feel safe. It made her feel human. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd like that." Clint nodded with a small smile, as if he had expected her answer but didn't want to assume. Throughout the evening, they talked more comfortably. Marla found herself laughing softly at one point, an unexpected sound that surprised both of them. Clint didn't comment on it. He simply smiled, happy she felt lighter. Later, when they stepped onto the porch again, Marla felt courage rising quietly inside her. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Clint, I'm not used to kindness. Not anymore." He looked at her with gentle seriousness. "Everyone deserves kindness, Marla, including you." She lowered her gaze, her heart warming. For a moment, she felt the world slow down, as if giving her space to breathe. This evening wasn't just another night for her. It felt like the beginning of trust, the beginning of healing, the beginning of a connection she never thought she would feel again. The next morning arrived slower and softer than the last. Marla woke in the guest room again, feeling a peace that surprised her every time she opened her eyes. She sat up, letting the loose sunlight fall across her face. Her heart felt lighter. Not healed, not fully steady, but lighter. And that was something she hadn't felt in years. She dressed quietly and stepped out into the hallway. Clint was already up, as ranchers always were before sunrise. But when Marla walked outside, she saw him leaning against the porch railing, watching the golden line of morning spread across his fields. He turned when he heard the door open. "Morning," he said, his voice warm but calm. "Morning," Marla replied, her tone gentle. He studied her expression for a moment. "You look rested." "I feel rested," she admitted, a little shy. "I can't remember the last time I felt this way." Clint nodded slowly, as if he understood without needing long explanations. "There's something about silence on a ranch," he said. "It lets the mind breathe." Marla looked out at the wide, open land. "I didn't know I needed that." He turned slightly toward her. "There's a lot you didn't get, but you deserve." The words caught her off guard, and she lowered her eyes. She wasn't used to anyone speaking to her with such steady kindness. Clint didn't push the moment. Instead, he motioned toward the yard. "Come on, let's walk. It helps clear the head." She followed him as they walked across the ranch grounds. Birds moved softly between branches, and the early breeze brushed against the tall grass. Marla breathed deeply, trying to take in everything. This new calm, this new connection, this gentle beginning she wasn't sure she was brave enough to accept. They walked in silence for a few minutes until Clint spoke. "You're planning to sell the farmhouse soon?" Marla nodded with a heavy sigh. "Yes. I don't have the strength to rebuild it. And even if I tried, I don't think I can live there alone." Clint looked ahead at the fields before them. "You don't have to be alone anymore." Marla stopped walking. Her breath hitched, not in fear, but in disbelief. She turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "Clint, I don't want to depend on anyone. I don't want to be a burden." He shook his head immediately. "You're not a burden. Not to me. Not for a moment." She swallowed, unsure how to hold all the emotions rising inside her. "I'm still learning how to be around people again," she whispered. "I get nervous. I say less. I freeze sometimes. I'm still figuring myself out." Clint stepped closer, only enough to show sincerity without crowding her space. "Then figure yourself out at your own pace. I'm not going anywhere." Her heart trembled. His steady presence, his complete lack of pressure, felt like a blessing she had never asked for, yet deeply needed. They continued walking, side by side, as the sun rose higher. Later, after breakfast, Clint suggested they visit the farmhouse one last time to gather the remaining belongings she wanted to keep. Marla agreed, feeling more prepared with him beside her. When they arrived, she walked through the rooms with calmer steps. She picked up a few things that carried memories she didn't want to lose: her mother's sewing box, her father's old watch, a faded photo album. Clint helped her gently, wrapping delicate items carefully and placing them into a small box. At one point, she paused in the hallway, her hand resting on the old wallpaper. "I feel like I'm finally saying goodbye," she whispered. Clint nodded. "Goodbyes aren't always endings. Sometimes they're just steps towards something better." His words felt like comfort given at exactly the right moment. After gathering everything she wanted, Marla closed the front door slowly. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She simply breathed out, long, soft, and relieved. The house was part of her story, but it didn't have to define her future. They drove back to the ranch, and by the time they arrived, the sky had turned a soft blue. Clint carried the box inside while Marla stood by the porch steps, looking out at the land that had brought her peace for the first time in a decade. Clint returned, wiping dust from his hands. "There's something I want to ask," he said carefully. Marla looked up, her breath tightening with curiosity. "You said yesterday that you didn't want to be alone," he began, "and I think maybe you don't have to be." She waited, her heart beating softly but steadily. "You can stay here," he said gently. "Not forever unless you want to, but long enough to regain your balance, long enough to feel safe again, long enough to breathe." Marla's eyes widened. "Stay here? With you?" "Only if you want to," Clint replied calmly. "There's space, there's quiet, and I won't ask anything from you except honesty." Her voice trembled. "I've been a shadow for so long. I don't know if I can be more than that." Clint's eyes held no judgment, only warmth. "You're already more." She lowered her gaze, overwhelmed by the kindness she had never expected. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," he said softly. "Just allow yourself a chance. That's enough." Marla looked at him again, her eyes shining not with sadness but with something new, hope, fragile but real. She nodded slowly. "Then I want to stay, at least for now." His smile was gentle, the kind that didn't celebrate loudly but carried sincere relief. "Good," he said. "I'm glad." The following days became the beginning of a quiet routine. Marla helped with small chores around the ranch, folding towels, preparing simple meals, watering plants. She moved carefully at first, nervous she might do something wrong. But Clint always encouraged her with simple words, soft gestures, and a calm presence. One evening, they sat on the porch again. The sky was deep orange, and the world felt peaceful. Marla held a warm cup between her hands, watching the horizon slowly fade into dusk. "I never thought I'd feel this again," she whispered. "This peace." Clint nodded, not looking away from the horizon. "Peace was waiting for you. You just needed a place to find it." She turned toward him. "Clint, can I tell you something else?" "Anything," he replied. She took a deep breath. "The first night I came here, I was terrified. I felt like a stranger in my own life. But you didn't make me feel strange. You made me feel human." Clint met her eyes with a steady, quiet sincerity. "Because you are, and you always were." Her chest warmed. She looked up at the sky again, speaking more confidently now. "Maybe I wasn't meant to live alone forever." Clint's voice softened. "You were meant to live in your own time, at your own pace, and I'm glad life brought you back here." Marla felt the truth settle in her heart. Not forced, not rushed, just real. She placed her cup down and folded her hands. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply appreciate the steady presence beside her, the man who had helped her take her first steps out of isolation, the man who showed her gentle kindness when she needed it most. "Clint," she whispered, "I'm not shy tonight." He smiled softly. "I noticed." For the first time in 10 long years, Marla felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was living again, slowly, carefully, hopefully. And she finally knew she had found a place where her heart could heal, not because someone demanded it, but because someone cared enough to make space for her. Her new beginning wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simply warm, steady, and real. A quiet life opening once more, a peaceful future forming step by gentle step. And beside her, a man who had given her the courage to return to the world.